Detective Marcus Reed lay face down on the cold pavement, his cheek scraping against the rough asphalt. A gun pressed into the back of his head, held by Officer Caleb Morrison, whose face twisted with adrenaline and something darker, unquestioned authority fueled by bias. "Don't move," Caleb barked, ignoring the gold badge glinting just inches from Marcus's outstretched hand. Around them, phones recorded. A woman screamed, "He's a cop!" But no one listened. Sirens approached. Another officer shouted, "Gun!" A single gunshot echoed. How did it come to this? Before we dive into the story, where are you watching from? If you believe in standing up for justice, hit like and subscribe to hear more stories like this. 12 hours earlier, Detective Marcus Reed sat behind the wheel of his unmarked sedan, shoulders slumped from exhaustion. The dashboard clock blinked 11:47 p.m., marking the end of another brutal 12-hour shift. His precinct, located in the heart of Mason Heights, had been stretched thin lately. Understaffed, overworked, and quietly simmering with tension that everyone pretended not to notice. But Marcus felt it. He always did. He rubbed his temples, trying to push away the lingering stress of his last case. A domestic dispute that had spiraled into a standoff. It wasn't just the cases that wore him down. It was the constant need to prove himself, not just as a detective, but as a black man in a system that often saw his badge as an anomaly rather than a credential. The streets of Mason Heights were quiet now, the kind of quiet that felt more eerie than peaceful. Gentrification had slowly crept into the neighborhood, replacing mom-and-pop shops with boutique cafes and yoga studios. But the undercurrent of division remained. Some things didn't change with fresh paint and trendy signage. Marcus's stomach growled, and he sighed. He hadn't eaten since lunch. Spotting a corner store still glowing under a flickering neon sign, he pulled over. The store sat on the edge of a transitioning block, one side lined with renovated brownstones, the other with boarded-up windows and graffiti that told stories no one cared to read. He stepped out, adjusting the hood of his red sweatshirt over, his head more for warmth than style. As he crossed the street, he passed a middle-aged white couple walking their golden retriever. The woman instinctively clutched her purse tighter. Marcus noticed but didn't react. He was too tired for righteous indignation tonight. This wasn't new. It was just another reminder that the badge under his jacket didn't shield him from assumptions. Inside the store, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Marcus grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum, heading for the counter. The cashier, a young white man with earbuds dangling around his neck, barely looked up until Marcus pulled out his wallet. The man's eyes flicked to Marcus's hoodie, then to his face and back again. The moment stretched uncomfortably long. "That it?" the cashier muttered, voice flat. "Yeah," Marcus replied, sliding a 10 across the counter. The cashier hesitated, his hand hovering near the silent alarm beneath the register. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. He fought the urge to flash his badge just to end the suspicion, but stopped himself. He shouldn't have to. Not here. Not anywhere. The transaction completed, Marcus pocketed his change and walked out, the cold night air biting through his sweatshirt. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the moment. It wasn't worth holding on to. It never was. As he turned the corner toward his car, something felt off. The street, once quiet, now seemed too quiet. A shadow moved in the periphery of his vision, a patrol car crawling along the curb at an unnaturally slow pace. Marcus frowned, instinct sharpening. It wasn't just any patrol car. It was Caleb Morrison's. Marcus had dealt with Morrison before. The man wore his authority like armor and wielded it like a weapon. They'd never clashed directly, but Marcus had heard the stories. Excessive stops, escalations over nothing, always justified under reasonable suspicion. Marcus kept walking, his movements calm and deliberate. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just a tired man heading home. Yet the patrol car lingered, headlights crawling alongside him like a predator, sizing up its prey. He reached his car, unlocked the door and paused. Across the street, Morrison's silhouette was visible through the windshield. He wasn't just passing by. He was watching, judging, deciding. Marcus clenched his jaw, forcing himself to look away. He slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors, heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with crime and everything to do with survival. He started the engine, pulling away slowly, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The patrol car didn't move, not yet, but Marcus knew the night wasn't over. Something had shifted in the air, an unspoken promise of conflict hanging like fog. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment the storm began to form. The moment a tired detective heading home became something else in the eyes of a man who saw skin color before a badge. And by the time the sun rose, Marcus's life would never be the same. The soft hum of Marcus Reed's engine blended with the quiet night as he pulled away from the corner store. He glanced in the rearview mirror. The patrol car still sat there, unmoving, like a predator biding its time. Marcus sighed, trying to push down the creeping unease. He'd done this dance before, being watched, judged, and evaluated for the crime of existing in the wrong skin at the wrong time. It never got easier, just more exhausting. 2 blocks later, the patrol car's headlights flickered to life, the engine growled, and Marcus's stomach tightened. Caleb Morrison was following him. Marcus kept his speed steady, careful not to give Morrison any reason to escalate. He flicked on his blinker long before the turn, rolled to a full stop at the next sign, and continued down the empty street. Every movement was deliberate, precise, textbook. Because when you're black and behind the wheel, perfection isn't just a standard, it's survival. Inside the patrol car, Officer Caleb Morrison's eyes narrowed as he chewed on the frayed end of a toothpick. His radio crackled. Unit 47, robbery reported at 13th and Pine. Suspect, black male, dark hoodie, possibly armed. Proceed with caution. Caleb leaned forward, and there it was. Confirmation bias kicking in like clockwork. He didn't see a tired detective heading home after a long shift. He saw a suspect. Dark hoodie, black male, alone on the street near a store. It all clicked in the worst way possible. Gotcha, Caleb muttered, tossing the toothpick aside. His hand hovered near his radio. He could call for backup, but why bother? He was sure he had the situation under control. Marcus turned onto a quieter street, hoping Morrison would lose interest. But the flash of red and blue lights filled his mirrors and his heart sank. Not tonight, not again, come on, Marcus whispered to himself, pulling over with the practiced calm of someone who'd done this far too often. He switched off the engine, rolled down his window, and kept both hands on the wheel. Standard protocol. The kind that could mean life or death if ignored. Footsteps crunched on the pavement, slow and deliberate. Morrison's face came into view, rigid and sharp under the street lamp's cold glow. His hand rested casually on the grip of his holstered pistol. License and registration, Morrison ordered, his tone clipped, eyes scanning the interior of the car like Marcus was a cornered animal. Marcus breathed deeply, keeping his voice steady. Officer, I'm Detective Marcus Reed, Homicide Division. Badge number 48217. I'm heading home after a shift. Morrison didn't blink. He didn't even glance at the badge Marcus slowly pulled from his jacket pocket. The word detective might as well have been invisible. All Morrison saw was skin and suspicion. Step out of the vehicle, Morrison barked, hand tightening on his weapon. Marcus froze. His mind raced through the possibilities. If he refused, it'd be non-compliance. If he complied too quickly, it'd be suspicious behavior. There was no right answer, only survival. Look, Marcus said carefully, holding his badge higher. I'm not armed. I'm on your side. Just call it in, and you'll see. I set out. Now. Morrison interrupted, voice sharp enough to slice through the thin fabric of civility. Slowly, painfully slowly, Marcus opened the door, hands raised to shoulder height. The cold air bit at his skin as he stepped onto the cracked pavement. That's when Morrison saw it, the holstered service weapon under Marcus's jacket. Standard issue, legal, registered, but none of that mattered. Gun! Morrison shouted, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion. Time slowed. Marcus froze, hands still up, heart pounding so hard it drowned out the rising murmur of bystanders across the street. Phones appeared, red lights blinking as recording apps activated. The night air thickened with tension, suffocating and electric. It's my service weapon, Marcus shouted, voice strained but controlled. I'm a detective. Check my badge. But Morrison didn't lower his gun. His bias had already painted Marcus as a threat, and now the presence of a gun, context be damned, sealed the narrative in his mind. Across the street, a woman's voice pierced the tension. "He's a cop. Look at his badge." But Morrison didn't budge. "On the ground, face down, now!" Morrison screamed, advancing with the barrel aimed dead center at Marcus's chest. Marcus's pride wrestled with his training. He'd spent years earning that badge, working twice as hard for half the recognition, and now, in an instant, it meant nothing. He swallowed the bitter taste of injustice and slowly lowered himself. To the ground, arms stretched out, badge still clutched in his left hand. The gravel bit into his palms. The world shrank to the sound of his own breathing and the click of Morrison's handcuffs snapping open. Somewhere a child cried. Somewhere another black man watched, knowing this could be his fate tomorrow. "Stop resisting," Morrison growled. Though Marcus hadn't moved an inch, a second patrol car screeched to a halt nearby. Two more officers jumped out, guns drawn, not at Morrison, but at Marcus. How does it always come to this? Marcus thought bitterly. How many times does proof of innocence fall on deaf ears? The cameras kept rolling, the crowd kept shouting, but none of it stopped the inevitable, cold steel tightening around Marcus's wrists and a knee pressing into his back. In that moment, Marcus realized something chilling. This wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about a system that saw his skin before his badge, his presence before his personhood. And the question that lingered in the cold night air, as cameras captured every humiliating second, would the truth matter before it was too late? Comment number 1 if you believe Marcus should have been treated with respect the moment he showed his badge. Like and subscribe if you think it's time stories like this stop being so familiar. But here's the real question. What happens when the system itself decides to protect the lie instead of the truth? Marcus Reed lay face down on the freezing pavement, the weight of Officer Caleb Morrison's knee pressing into his back. His badge, the very symbol of his hard-earned authority, lay discarded inches from his outstretched fingers, glinting under the harsh glare of the street lamp. The irony wasn't lost on him. His identity, his protection cast aside like trash, while the hands meant to uphold justice crushed him into submission. "Stay down," Morrison barked, handcuffs clinking as he yanked Marcus's arms behind his back. Marcus gritted his teeth against the pain. He could handle the physical discomfort. He'd endured worse during his years on the force. What cut deeper was the betrayal. He wore the same badge as Morrison, swore the same oath, but his skin had stripped all that away in the eyes of a man who saw threat before truth. "Detective Marcus Reed," Marcus rasped, voice tight from the pressure on his chest. "Homicide Division, badge number 48217, call it in." "Save it," Morrison snapped, wrenching one wrist into the cuff. "I'm not falling for some fake badge trick." Marcus swallowed his rage. Fighting would only confirm the narrative Morrison had already written in his head. Compliance was survival, even when survival felt like surrender. Tires screeched as another patrol car rounded the corner. Two officers spilled out, Officers Riley and Chen, both familiar faces from the precinct. Relief flickered through Marcus. Someone would recognize him. Someone would stop this insanity. But the relief was short-lived. Riley's eyes locked on the scene. Black man on the ground, gun holstered, white officer standing over him, and her hand immediately flew to her weapon. "Gun!" she shouted, drawing her pistol without hesitation. Chen followed suit, both barrels aimed squarely at Marcus's head. It didn't matter that his face was already pressed into the asphalt, hands pinned and empty. The sight alone, the hoodie, the skin, the scene crafted by Morrison's narrative, was enough. Marcus froze, every muscle screaming against the injustice. "Riley, it's Marcus. Detective Reed, look at my badge." Riley hesitated, confusion flickering across her face. She glanced at Morrison, who stood tall and resolute. "He says he's a cop," she muttered, uncertain. Morrison didn't waver. "Fake badge. Fits the description of the robbery suspect. Hoodie, black male, possibly armed." Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. Possibly armed. He was the one being held down, unarmed and immobile, while 3 guns pointed at his head. "Call it in," Marcus barked, desperation creeping into his voice. Don't just take his word. Check my badge number. It'll clear this up in seconds. But Riley didn't reach for her radio. Neither did Chen. They kept their weapons trained, waiting for the order that would tip the scale from detainment to tragedy. The crowd across the street grew louder, phones held high, recording every second. "He's a cop," a woman screamed. Again, voice breaking with panic. "Stop this, check his badge." Morrison glanced at the bystanders, jaw tightening. His grip on Marcus's cuffed wrist tightened, his authority slipping under the weight of the crowd's scrutiny. He didn't want to lose face. Not now, not after doubling down so hard. "Backup's already on the way," Morrison muttered. "We'll sort it out at the station." Marcus's blood ran cold. The station. That was the last place he wanted to be right now. Inside those walls, away from the cameras, the narrative would be entirely in Morrison's control. He'd be just another non-compliant suspect, another statistic buried under bureaucratic indifference. "Don't do this," Marcus said, voice steady despite the fury boiling beneath. "You're making a mistake and it's all on camera," Morrison sneered. "Cameras don't change facts. You match the description, you've got a gun, and you're resisting." The sound of more sirens cut through the night air, growing louder by the second. Marcus's heart pounded. The next few moments would decide everything, whether this ended with handcuffs and bruises or something far worse. The approaching squad cars skidded to a halt, lights flashing in chaotic bursts of red and blue. 3 officers emerged, one of them Sergeant Lila Torres, a no-nonsense veteran with 20 years on the force and little patience for theatrics. Her sharp gaze swept the scene, taking in Marcus on the ground, Morrison standing tall, and the crowd filming every angle. She didn't draw her weapon, she didn't need to. Authority radiated from her like heat off asphalt in July. "What the hell's going on here?" Torres snapped, striding forward. "Robbery suspect," Morrison said quickly, stepping between her and Marcus. "Black male, dark hoodie, armed." He resisted. "Found a badge on him, but it's probably fake." Torres's eyes narrowed. She knew Marcus. They'd worked cases together, argued over strategies, even shared late-night coffee during endless stakeouts. But in this moment she hesitated. Not because she doubted Marcus's identity, but because she saw the political minefield ahead. "Reed?" she asked. Voice taut. "Detective Marcus Reed," Marcus confirmed, twisting his neck to look at her. "Homicide Division, badge number 48217. Check it, please." Torres didn't move for her radio. She turned to Morrison. "Did you check his badge?" Morrison stiffened. Didn't need to. He was acting suspicious, matched the description. Could have been reaching for a weapon. Torres's face darkened. "Could have. You cuffed a man with a badge and didn't confirm his identity." "He fits the profile," Morrison snapped, frustration breaking through his facade. "What was I supposed to do, take his word for it?" Torres's gaze flicked to the crowd, the countless phones capturing every second. She knew how this would look, how it would play, and more importantly, how it would reflect on the department if they doubled down on a mistake already spiraling out of control. "Riley," Torres ordered, voice sharp as glass, "run the badge number, now." Riley hesitated. One glance at Morrison's flushed face told her everything, but she couldn't ignore a direct order. With reluctant hands, she reached for her radio. "Dispatch. Verify badge number 48217. Detective Marcus Reed. Homicide." Static. Hummed for a tense moment. The crowd held its breath. Even Morrison, stubborn and sweating, shifted uneasily. "Copy that," the dispatcher's voice crackled through. "Badge number 48217 confirmed. Detective Marcus Reed. Active duty, Homicide Division. No warrants, no alerts." Silence fell like a hammer. Torres's jaw tightened. "Uncuff him now." Morrison didn't move. His hand hovered near his holster, eyes darting between Marcus and the crowd. He wasn't just losing control, he was losing face. And men like him didn't handle humiliation well. "Now, Officer Morrison," Torres repeated, stepping closer, voice low and dangerous. With a muttered curse, Morrison yanked the cuffs off Marcus's wrists, the metal biting one last time before falling. Away. Marcus slowly pushed himself up, ignoring the ache in his shoulders, his breath steady despite the fury churning inside. The crowd erupted, cheers and angry shouts blending into a chaotic roar. "We told you! He's a cop!" someone yelled. "This ain't over," shouted another, but Marcus barely heard them. His focus stayed locked on Morrison, whose face was pale with rage and embarrassment. This wasn't just a mistake to him. It was a challenge to his authority, and men like Morrison didn't forget challenges. Torres stepped between them, hand resting lightly on her belt. "Detective Reed," she said, voice tight with controlled anger. "Are you injured?" "Nothing I can't handle," Marcus muttered, brushing dust from his jeans. His wrists throbbed, skin raw where the cuffs had bitten deep. Torres nodded, jaw clenched. "We'll sort this out back at the precinct." Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. Sort it out? The truth was already out, glaring and undeniable. But the system didn't bend just because it was wrong. It doubled down, smoothed over, and moved on like nothing had happened. "Don't bother," Marcus said coldly, snatching his badge off the ground. "We both know how this ends. Report filed, slap on the wrist, back on patrol like nothing happened." Torres didn't argue. She couldn't. They both knew he was right. As Marcus turned to leave, the crowd parted for him like water around a stone. Phones stayed raised, eyes wide with disbelief. The video was already spreading, pinging across social media, gaining traction with every second. But Marcus didn't care about viral moments. He cared about survival and the sickening truth. Settled in his gut like lead, this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. And the next time he might not walk away. Marcus Reed stood on the cracked pavement, wrists throbbing from the too tight handcuffs that had only just been removed. The flashing lights from patrol cars painted the street in frantic bursts of red and blue, but the worst was over. At least, that's what everyone wanted to believe. Sergeant Lila Torres, her face tight with restrained fury, motioned for the other officers to lower their weapons. Riley hesitated, eyes darting between Marcus and Morrison, but eventually holstered her gun. The tension in the air didn't dissipate. It thickened, coiling like a snake waiting to strike again. "Detective Reed," Torres said, voice clipped, and formal. "You're free to go, free." The word tasted bitter. Marcus didn't feel free. He felt exposed, humiliated, betrayed. He flexed his hands, circulation returning painfully as he glanced down at the reddened grooves around his wrists. His badge, once a symbol of protection and service, now felt like dead weight in his pocket. Marcus locked eyes with Morrison, who stood stiffly by his patrol car, jaw clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might crack. The man didn't speak. He didn't apologize. He just stared, hatred simmering beneath the surface, barely contained by the presence of cameras still recording from across the street. The crowd hadn't dispersed. If anything, it had grown. People stood on stoops, leaned out of windows, and gathered on sidewalks, their faces a mosaic of anger, relief, and disbelief. Someone called out, "That's what happens when you're black, even with a badge." Marcus's fists curled. He wanted to yell, to lash out, to demand accountability. But years of training, both as a detective and as a black man navigating a world that saw him as a threat first and a person second, kept his rage contained. He inhaled, slowly, controlling the fire in his chest. "Write this up," Torres ordered her team, her tone sharp and businesslike. "Full incident report, body cam footage, witness statements." Morrison didn't move. He just glared at Marcus, eyes burning with the humiliation of being proven wrong. To men like him, being right mattered more than being just. Marcus shook, his head, voice tight with restrained fury. "Don't bother, Sergeant. We both know how this ends, a sanitized report, a quiet misunderstanding, and he's back on the street tomorrow like nothing happened." Torres didn't argue. She couldn't. The system wasn't built to hold men like Morrison accountable. It was built to protect them, to bury incidents like this under paperwork and procedural jargon until the outrage faded and life moved on. Except life never really moved on for people like Marcus. The scars stayed. "Get home safe, Detective," Torres said quietly, almost like an apology. Marcus didn't reply. He just turned and walked toward his car, shoulders tight with the weight of injustice. The crowd parted for him, murmuring words of support, but their faces were tired, resigned. They'd seen this play out before. They'd see it again. As Marcus slid into the driver's seat, the adrenaline that had kept him steady began to crash. His hands trembled against the steering wheel. He took deep breaths, forcing calm where there was none. His phone buzzed on. The passenger seat, notifications flooding in as the video of his arrest spread like wildfire across social media. He ignored them. He just wanted to go home, to pretend for a few hours that the badge still meant something, that justice wasn't just a word weaponized by those in power, but fate had other plans. Back at the precinct, Morrison stood outside his patrol car watching. Marcus drove away, his face twisted into something ugly, part wounded pride, part simmering hate. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screen before typing a message. "I'm not done with him." Across town, Marcus finally parked in front of his modest townhouse. The porch light flickered, another thing on the long list of repairs he hadn't gotten around to. He sat in the car for a moment, head resting against the seat, exhaustion sinking into his bones. He'd faced plenty of racism before, covert glances, patronizing comments, the ever-present doubt from colleagues who pretended his promotions were about quotas rather than merit. But this was different. This was violent, raw, and public. The moment he stepped inside, his wife Maya was there, eyes wide with worry. "I saw the video," she said, voice shaking. "Are you okay?" Marcus forced a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just another day in the life, right?" Maya didn't smile back. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the red marks on his wrists. "This isn't normal, Marcus. It's not just another day. It's wrong. They could have killed you." He kissed her forehead, silent because she was right. They both knew it. His phone buzzed again. Reluctantly, he glanced at the screen. This time, it wasn't social media. It was an anonymous text message. "Back off, detective. Next time you won't walk away." Marcus's breath caught. The chill that had settled after the confrontation flared into something colder, sharper. This wasn't over. Morrison, or someone else in his circle, wasn't content with humiliation. They wanted revenge. He showed Maya the message, her face paled. "Marcus, you need to report this." "To who?" Marcus snapped, bitterness bleeding into his tone. "The same department that just threw me to the ground, the same system that'll call this a prank. And ignore it until someone gets hurt." Maya swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. "So what do we do? Just wait for them to come knocking?" Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the screen, jaw tightening. This wasn't just about him anymore, it never had been. It was about every black man stopped for matching a description, every badge-wearing officer of color forced to prove. They belonged, every family who got a knock on the door instead of a phone call home. He stood, shoulders squaring. "We don't wait," he said quietly. "We fight. We make sure the world sees this for what it is." But how do you fight a system designed to protect itself? How do you stand tall when the very foundation beneath your feet is cracked and crumbling? Comment number 1. If you believe Marcus should report the threat, even if the system might ignore it. Like and subscribe if you think it's time these stories stopped being so common. But here's the real question. What happens when the system itself decides one man's truth is more dangerous than its lies? The next morning, Marcus Reed woke to the buzzing of his phone vibrating relentlessly on the nightstand. The soft light of dawn filtered through the blinds, but the world outside was far from quiet. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion still clinging to him like a second skin. The night before had been restless. Every creak of the house, every shadow under the street lamp felt like a threat waiting to strike. He reached for the phone, blinking at the endless stream of notifications. Missed calls, texts, emails, social media alerts. It was like a flood, and he was drowning in it. Justice for Marcus was trending. Videos of the arrest had gone viral overnight, spreading across platforms faster than wildfire. Clips from multiple angles showed the same damning reality. A black detective face down on the pavement, badge ignored, gun drawn on him by a fellow officer. The crowd's shouts, the panic in Marcus's voice as he tried to de-escalate, the cold dismissal from Morrison. It was all there, unfiltered and undeniable. News headlines screamed from every corner of the internet. Detective mistaken for suspect by fellow officer sparks outrage. How did this happen? Black cop held at gunpoint despite identifying himself. Badge doesn't protect blackness. Viral arrest raises questions about policing bias. Marcus sat up, dread pooling in his stomach. He hadn't wanted this. He'd wanted to go home, eat dinner with Maya, and forget the humiliation. But the world had other plans. Maya walked into the room, phone in hand, worry etched into every line of her face. Marcus, it's everywhere. CNN, Twitter, even the local news is running it nonstop. Marcus exhaled slowly. Good. Maybe now they'll listen. Her expression didn't soften. Listen? Or retaliate? You know how this works. They don't fix the system, they protect it, and you just expose them. As if on cue, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't another news alert. It was a text from an unknown number. Hope the views were worth it. Watch your back, detective. Marcus's grip tightened around the phone. The threats had started last night, but he'd ignored them, chalking it up to internet trolls. Now, in the harsh light of day, they felt more real, more personal. His precinct wasn't quiet either. By the time Marcus arrived for his shift, the mood inside was electric with tension. Conversations hushed as he passed, eyes flicking toward him, like he was radioactive. He wasn't surprised. He'd made the department look bad, not by choice but by existing in the wrong skin while wearing the right badge. At his desk, Detective Carla Ramirez, one of the few allies he trusted, leaned in, voice low. Brass. Hayes pissed. Not just Morrison, everyone up the chain. The captain called a meeting. Damage control. Marcus's jaw clenched. Damage control? For who? Me or the department? Carla gave him a look that said everything. It was never about protecting the individual. It was about protecting the image. The meeting was worse than he expected. Captain Reynolds stood at the front of the room, arms crossed, flanked by two department PR officers. The slideshow behind them didn't show Morrison holding a gun on Marcus. It showed grainy, zoomed-in stills, Marcus's hoodie, the moment he reached for his badge, the gun under his jacket barely visible. Context stripped. Away, narrative reshaped. We're facing backlash, Reynolds said, voice cold and detached. But the department stands by Officer Morrison's decision to prioritize safety in an uncertain situation. This is about protocol, not prejudice. Marcus couldn't stay quiet. Protocol? He ignored my badge, ignored my words. He escalated, because of what he thought he saw, not what was real. Reynolds' gaze sharpened. Detective Reed, this isn't the time to grandstand. It's not grandstanding if it's the truth, Marcus shot back. If a badge doesn't protect me, what does? The room fell silent. No one answered because there was no answer. Just silence and the unspoken reality hanging heavy in the air. The department's official statement dropped an hour later. It was everything Marcus had expected, carefully worded, devoid of accountability. The Mason Heights Police Department is committed to ensuring the safety of all citizens and officers. In fast-moving situations, decisions are made based on available information. We regret any misunderstanding and are reviewing protocols to prevent similar incidents in the future. Regret, Marcus muttered, reading the statement on his phone. Not apologize, not hold accountable, just regret. But the public wasn't buying it. Comments flooded social media. How do you misunderstand a badge and a man saying he's a detective? If Marcus Reed wasn't a cop, he'd be another hashtag right now. The system protects its own. Unless you're black, then it eats you alive. That night things got uglier. His home address was leaked online. Marcus found out when Maya, pale and shaking, shoved her phone into his hands. Look, they posted our address. Our home, Marcus. The website was one of those dark corners of the internet, frequented by extremists hiding behind anonymity. Next to their address was a thread filled with hate. Fake cop trying to play victim. Time to teach him a lesson. Hope he enjoys his 15 minutes. It's the last piece he'll get. Reed thinks the badge makes him untouchable. He's about to find out otherwise. Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about reputation anymore. It was about survival. He called it in, expecting the department to respond with urgency. They didn't. Can't trace the IPs, the desk sergeant muttered when Marcus showed him the threats. Probably just internet tough guys. Nothing actionable. Nothing. Actionable? Marcus snapped, voice rising. "My wife and I are getting death threats. Our home address is circulating. And you're telling me to ignore it?" The sergeant shrugged. "It's not the first time someone in the department got heat online. It'll blow over." Marcus stared at him, disbelief morphing into fury. He wasn't just fighting Morrison anymore. He was fighting a system determined to protect itself, even if it meant sacrificing one of its own. That night, Marcus sat by the window, watching the street with tired, unblinking eyes. Maya tried to sleep, but kept jolting awake at the slightest sound. Outside, a car crawled past, its headlights off. Marcus's hand drifted to the service weapon resting on the table beside him. He'd spent years believing the badge offered protection, not just from criminals, but from the system itself. Now, stripped of that illusion, he faced a chilling truth. The badge only protected those the system deemed worthy, and to the system his skin outweighed his service. The viral video hadn't sparked change. It had sparked retaliation. Marcus exhaled slowly, his mind sharpening with resolve. They wanted him silent, compliant, afraid. He wouldn't give them that satisfaction. But the question lingered, heavy and unrelenting. How do you fight an enemy that wears the same uniform as you? The next morning, Marcus Reed walked into the precinct with his head held high, despite the weight dragging at his every step. The threats hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd intensified overnight. Anonymous messages, veiled warnings, even a fake obituary posted online with his name and photo. But Marcus wasn't backing down. He'd spent too long fighting for a system that barely acknowledged his worth. Now he was fighting for himself. The air inside the precinct was colder than usual, tension hanging like smoke after a gunshot. Conversations hushed as he passed, eyes flicking toward him, then quickly away. He wasn't just a colleague anymore. He was a spotlight, shining too brightly on an institution that preferred its shadows. "Reed," Sergeant Lila Torres called. From her office doorway, voice tight. "Briefing room now." Marcus's stomach knotted. He hadn't been assigned a case since the incident with Morrison. Officially, he was still on active duty, but everyone knew what it meant when the brass wanted you low profile. He stepped into the briefing room, where Captain Reynolds stood by the whiteboard, arms crossed. Morrison leaned against the wall, arms folded, a smug smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "Detective Reed," Reynolds began, ignoring the tension crackling in the room. "There's been another robbery. Same MO as the one Morrison. Responded to the night he stopped you. Corner store, late night, blackmail suspect, dark clothing. Store clerk identified the suspect as possibly armed. You're assigned to the investigation." Marcus blinked. "Me? After everything?" Reynolds's face didn't change. "You're still a detective, aren't you? Or do you want desk duty while this whole mess blows over?" It wasn't an olive branch, it was a trap. Marcus knew it the moment Morrison's smile widened, shark-like. But walking away meant surrendering the only leverage he had, his position, his badge, his voice. So he nodded, jaw tight. "I'll take the case." "Good," Reynolds said, already turning back to the board. "Suspect was last seen near Jefferson and 12th. Surveillance footage is sketchy, but it's all we've got. Find him." Marcus walked out of the briefing room, mind racing. Something felt off. The timing, the assignment, the way Morrison watched. Him like a cat watching a mouse stumble into a corner. He couldn't prove it, yet, but instinct screamed that this was more than coincidence. Carla Ramirez caught up with him in the hallway, her expression pinched with worry. "Marcus," she muttered under her breath, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "This stinks. They're setting you up." "I know," Marcus replied, voice low and controlled, "but I'm not walking into it blind." He spent the next few hours working the case by the book. He visited the corner store, spoke to the shaken cashier, a middle-aged man who avoided eye contact and stumbled over details. The surveillance footage was grainy, the timestamp glitching in a way that felt more like tampering than technical failure. Every lead circled back to the same vague description: blackmail, dark hoodie, possibly armed, the same description they'd pinned on Marcus days earlier. By noon, Marcus had enough to confirm his suspicions, but not enough to prove them. He returned to the precinct, frustration gnawing at him. As he stepped into the bullpen, Morrison was already there, standing beside Captain Reynolds' desk, a file in hand. "Reed," Morrison called, voice dripping with false camaraderie. "Got some news for you." Marcus's heart sank. He didn't. "I need to hear it to know the game had shifted." "Fingerprint analysis came back from the robbery scene," Morrison continued, flipping open the file with theatrical flair. "Guess whose prints were found on the counter?" He held up a photo. Marcus's own personnel file, fingerprint card front and center. Marcus froze. His mind scrambled for an explanation. He'd never been near that store outside of casual visits for coffee or snacks. There was no legitimate reason for his prints to be there, unless someone had planted them. "This is bull," Marcus started, but Reynolds cut him off. "Enough." The captain's face was stone. "Internal Affairs has already been notified. Until this is sorted, Detective Reed, you're suspended. Badge and weapon, now." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Marcus, some wide with disbelief, others, like Morrison's, glittering with satisfaction. Marcus stood rooted, fury warring with the bitter taste of betrayal. "I didn't do this," Marcus said quietly, pulling his badge from his belt and placing it on the desk with deliberate care. "And you know it." Reynolds didn't flinch. "Save it for your union rep." Marcus handed over his service weapon, the weight of it leaving his hand like an anchor cut loose. He didn't need the gun to feel powerful. He needed the truth. And now, stripped of his authority, he had nothing left to lose. As two uniformed officers escorted him to an empty holding cell, standard protocol for officers under investigation, Marcus glanced back. Morrison stood by the desk, arms crossed, victorious. The message was clear. "You tried to humiliate me. Now it's your turn." The cell door clanged shut behind him, cold metal sealing him away from the world he'd once served. He sat on the hard bench, head in his hands, trying to piece together the trap that had closed around him. It wasn't just about Morrison's wounded pride anymore. This was systematic. Someone higher up wanted Marcus silenced, discredited, erased. The arrest, the threats, the fabricated evidence, it all pointed to one chilling conclusion. The system wasn't just failing Marcus, it was targeting him. Hours passed, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like mosquitoes. No lawyer, no explanation, just silence and the cold realization that without his badge, Marcus was nothing more than another black man behind bars, another statistic in a system designed to crush dissent. But Marcus wasn't done fighting. He never had been. When Carla Ramirez finally appeared, face pale and drawn, she didn't waste time. She slipped a burner phone through the cell bars, her voice urgent. "Don't ask how I got this, just use it. Get your story out before they bury it." Marcus took the phone, heart pounding. He didn't need the badge to seek justice. He just needed the truth, and the world watching. Comment number 1. If you believe Marcus is being framed by the very system he served. Like and subscribe if you think it's time corrupt officers face real accountability. But here's the real question. When the system turns on its own, how far will it go to protect the lie? Marcus Reed sat in the cold, dimly lit holding cell. The burner phone Carla Ramirez had slipped him, resting heavily in his hand. The irony wasn't lost on him. A decorated detective locked up by his own department, framed with evidence so flimsy, it would be laughable if it weren't deadly serious. His badge was gone, his weapon was gone, but the truth, that was still his. And now, thanks to Carla, he had a way to make sure the world saw it. He unlocked the phone and immediately opened the camera app. His face, weary but resolute, stared back at him. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows, making the bruises from Morrison's earlier detainment stand out even more. Good. Let them see everything. He hit record. "My name is Detective Marcus Reed," he began, voice steady despite the fury simmering beneath the surface. "If you're seeing this, it means the system I served for over a decade is trying to silence me. I was framed for a robbery I didn't commit. My fingerprints were planted. The officer responsible? Caleb Morrison, the same man who held a gun to my head days ago, ignoring my badge and my identity." He paused, swallowing the bitterness rising in his throat. "I'm not the first black man to be targeted by the system, but I'll be damned if I let them make me the last." Marcus ended the recording and immediately uploaded it to every social media platform the burner phone allowed: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. He knew the algorithms wouldn't take long to do their job. The world was already watching. Justice for Marcus. Now they'd see the next chapter unfold in real time. The video spread like wildfire. Within minutes, his phone buzzed with notifications, comments, retweets, shares. But the one message that stood out came from an unknown number. "You just made yourself a bigger target. Hope you're ready." Marcus gritted his teeth. He was beyond ready. 2 hours later, Carla returned, her face drawn and anxious. "It's blowing up, Marcus. The precinct's buzzing. Captain Reynolds is losing his mind, but more importantly, someone inside leaked the internal memos about Morrison's disciplinary record. It's worse than we thought. He's got complaints, buried deep. Excessive force, racial profiling, even a wrongful death settlement the department paid out quietly." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And they still let him patrol? Still let him wear a badge?" Carla nodded grimly. "Because he was useful. He did the dirty work they didn't want tied back to them. But now, he's a liability. And when the department sees someone as a liability, they cut him loose," Marcus finished. "Or they find a scapegoat." He glanced around the cell. "Looks like I'm the preferred option." "Not if we move fast," Carla said, glancing over her shoulder. "I convinced Torres to stall the paperwork on your formal charges. She doesn't want to be part of this mess, but she won't stick her neck out unless there's undeniable proof. We need something bigger. Something that doesn't just clear you, but exposes the whole damn cover-up." Marcus's mind raced. The body cam footage. Morrison's body cam had been on during the initial stop. The footage that should have confirmed Marcus's identity the moment he showed his badge. But it had conveniently gone missing from the evidence log. "Body cam," Marcus said, eyes sharp. "Morrison's footage from the night he detained me. It didn't disappear. It was buried." Carla's eyes widened. "If we can get that—" "It won't just clear me," Marcus interrupted, standing slowly. "It'll burn their whole house of lies to the ground." Carla hesitated. "The footage will be stored in the secure evidence archive, only command level. Access can pull it without raising alarms." Marcus's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Good thing we know someone with command-level access." An hour later, Carla returned, slipping Marcus out of the holding cell under the pretense of a re-interview. Torres stood by the back exit, arms crossed, face tight with stress. "I'm risking my career for this," she muttered, tossing Marcus a plain grey hoodie to replace his department-issued shirt. "You better be right." "I'm not asking you to believe me," Marcus replied, pulling the hoodie over his head. "Just believe the facts when you see them." Torres sighed and nodded toward the rear hallway. "The evidence archive's on limited access after hours. Morrison's not here, but Reynolds is. You've got 10 minutes tops." They moved quickly through the maze-like corridors, every step echoing louder than it should. The precinct felt different now, less like home, more like enemy territory. Every glance from passing officers felt like a threat, every radio crackle a warning. At the evidence room, Carla swiped her access card and the heavy steel door clicked open. Inside, rows of shelves stretched toward the back wall, each labeled with case numbers and incident dates. Marcus headed straight for the digital evidence terminal. Search Incident Report, January 14th. Officer Caleb Morrison, body cam footage. The screen blinked, loading for what felt like an eternity. Then a single file appeared. Vid 1147, Morrison, C. "Got it," Marcus muttered, plugging in a flash drive Carla handed him. He copied the file, heart pounding with every progress bar that ticked upward. 5 minutes, Torres warned from the doorway. "Hurry it up." As the transfer completed, Marcus glanced through the nearby logs. One entry caught his eye, an authorization request under his name, dated the day after his suspension. "Someone accessed my personnel file," he muttered, brows knitting together. Carla leaned in. "That's how they got your fingerprints. They pulled your old background check forms, lifted the prints and planted them at the robbery scene." Marcus exhaled sharply. It was worse than he thought. This wasn't sloppy corruption. It was calculated, precise. Someone high up wanted him gone, not just discredited, but erased. Done, he said, yanking the flash drive free. Let's go. Back in Torres's office, they watched the footage together. It was damning. The video showed everything. Marcus presenting his badge clearly, Morrison ignoring it, the crowd shouting that Marcus was a cop. But the most incriminating part came near the end. After Marcus was cuffed and taken away, Morrison turned toward Riley, his partner that night. "Badge don't mean shit if you're black," Morrison muttered, thinking the camera had already been switched off. One less problem if he resists next time. Torres paled. Carla cursed under her breath. Marcus just stared at the screen, rage boiling quietly beneath the surface. "There it is," Marcus said, voice cold. "Proof, not just of Morrison's racism, but of intent. He wanted me gone one way or another." Torres nodded, determination hardening her features. "This goes straight to the chief, no detours," but Marcus shook his head. "The department's already shown where its loyalties. We go public. Again, let the court of public opinion make it too big for them to sweep under the rug." Torres hesitated, then relented. "Do it, but know this. Once it's out there, you're untouchable, or you're dead. No middle ground." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been living in the middle ground my whole life, time to pick a side." That night, the footage hit the internet. Marcus's video confession had been powerful. But the body cam footage? It was undeniable. News anchors dissected every frame. Legal analysts debated the implications, and the public exploded. "Fire Morrison" trended alongside "Dark Justice for Marcus," but another hashtag emerged. Systemic rot, fueled by the revelation that the E department had ignored Morrison's past misconduct for years. The backlash was immediate. The mayor called an emergency press conference, promising a full investigation. The chief of police, cornered by public scrutiny, had no choice but to suspend Morrison without pay pending an internal review, but Marcus knew better. This wasn't over. Morrison wasn't the type to go quietly, and whoever had authorized the fingerprint tampering was still out there, watching, waiting for the next move. As Marcus sat in his darkened living room, phone buzzing with media requests and messages of support, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. They'd struck back hard, but cornered animals were the most dangerous. And Morrison, he was far from cornered. Not yet. The morning after the body cam footage went public, Marcus Reed woke to the sound of his phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Sunlight cut through the blinds, but the warmth did nothing to thaw the cold dread that settled in his gut. He already knew what the notifications would say. He didn't need to look. The world had seen the truth. Morrison's blatant racism, the deliberate cover-up, and the department's complicity. News anchors dissected the footage frame by frame, while civil rights organizations called for immediate action. Protests swelled outside the Mason Heights Police Department, signs waving with bold slogans, "Justice for Marcus," "End police impunity." Badge doesn't erase blackness, but with every wave of support came an undercurrent of hate. Death threats flooded Marcus's inbox. Anonymous messages promised revenge. The same dark corners of the internet that had leaked his address now circulated calls to teach the traitor a lesson. Maya, his wife, stood in the kitchen, coffee untouched, eyes fixed on the TV. "They suspended Morrison," she muttered, disbelief coloring her tone. "But no charges, no arrest, just administrative leave." Marcus sighed, rubbing his temple. "Suspension's just PR, they're waiting for the noise to die down, hoping people move on." "But they won't," Maya snapped, slamming the remote down. "They saw everything. How can the system protect him after that?" Marcus didn't answer. He knew how, because the system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed to protect itself. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat. It was Carla Ramirez. "Marcus," she said the moment he picked up, voice sharp with urgency. "Get out of the house now." "What?" Marcus froze. "What's going on?" "Morrison's gone off the radar," Carla hissed. "He cleaned out his locker, wiped his phone records. Torres thinks he's planning something, and your name's still at the top of his hit list." Marcus's blood ran cold. He turned, locking eyes with Maya, who had already grabbed her coat. She didn't need to hear the other side of the call to understand. Get somewhere public, Carla continued. Crowded, cameras everywhere. I'll try to track his location, but you need to... The line went dead. Static. Then nothing. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. He didn't wait. We're leaving now. Grabbing his jacket, he ushered Maya out the door, eyes scanning the street for anything out of place. The quiet suburban calm felt unnatural, like the hush before a storm. He unlocked the car, glancing both ways down the street. That's when he saw it. A dark sedan idling at the corner. Windows tinted, no plates. Maya, get in now, he barked, shoving her toward the passenger side. But it was too late. The sedan roared to life, tires screeching as it sped toward them. Marcus barely had time to register the driver. Morrison, face twisted with rage, eyes wild with desperation. Marcus yanked Maya back just as the car swerved, missing them by inches. It barreled down the street, disappearing around the corner. "Inside!" Marcus ordered, heart pounding. They stumbled back into the house, slamming the door shut and locking it. Marcus grabbed his phone, shaking fingers, dialing Carla again. Voicemail. "Damn it," he muttered. He switched to Torres. Straight to voicemail. Maya's breath came in shallow gasps. "Marcus, he's not going to stop." Marcus knew she was right. Morrison had nothing left to lose. He'd been exposed, humiliated, and abandoned by the department he thought would protect him, and now revenge was the only thing driving him. A loud crash shattered the tense silence. Glass exploded from the front window as a brick sailed through, landing with a dull thud on the carpet. Attached to it was a note, scrawled in red marker. Last warning, back off or bleed. Marcus's world narrowed to a single, undeniable truth. This wouldn't end until one of them was gone. He turned to Maya, voice calm despite the storm inside. "I get to Carla's, take her spare key and lock the doors behind you. Don't open for anyone but me." "What about you?" Maya's eyes widened. "Marcus, you can't face him alone." "I won't," Marcus lied, pressing the car keys into her hand. "I'll meet you there, go." Reluctantly, she nodded, grabbing her purse and rushing out the back door. Marcus watched until the car disappeared down the alley. Only then did he move. He retrieved the burner phone Carla had given him, hands steady now with purpose. He typed out a single message and sent it to the group chat he, Carla, and Torres had been using for sensitive communication. Morrison's, "Gone rogue. Threatened my life. I'm ending this. Need backup. Send location if you find him." The reply came almost instantly. Not from Carla, not from Torres, from Morrison himself. "Too late. Look behind you." Marcus spun, heart slamming against his ribs. The front door burst open with a deafening crack, and there stood Morrison, gun drawn, face flushed with fury. "Thought you could ruin me?" Morrison sneered, stepping inside. "Thought the world would save you? Cameras, hashtags, they don't mean shit when you're dead." Marcus raised his hands slowly, mind racing. "Think this through, Morrison. You kill a man under investigation. You'll never see daylight again." "Won't matter," Morrison growled, advancing. "They already think I'm a monster. Might as well live up to it." The gun leveled at Marcus's chest. His breath caught. This is it, Marcus thought. Here's how it ends. But fate had other plans. A sharp crack split the air, not from Morrison's gun, from the street outside, the sound of tires screeching, followed by the blaring wail of sirens. Morrison hesitated, eyes flickering toward the window. Marcus didn't. He lunged, knocking the gun aside as it discharged, the bullet burying itself into the wall. They grappled, years of training clashing in brutal, desperate movements. Morrison outweighed Marcus, fueled by blind rage, but Marcus had something else: clarity, purpose, the unyielding will to survive. The fight spilled into the hallway, fists landing with sickening thuds. Marcus managed to twist Morrison's arm, forcing the gun loose. It clattered to the floor. Then the front door slammed open. Torres, flanked by two officers, gun drawn. "Freeze! Hands where I can see them!" Morrison froze, chest heaving, eyes darting between Marcus and the gun at his feet. For a moment it seemed like he'd comply. Then in one final act of defiance, Morrison dove for the weapon. 3 shots rang out. Morrison collapsed, lifeless before he hit the ground. Silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Torres lowered her weapon, face pale. The officers moved in, securing the scene, but Marcus barely noticed. He stood there, breathing hard, staring down at the man who had tried to destroy him. It was over, but the cost had been steep. Marcus sank to the floor, exhaustion crashing over him. The fight was done, but the war, that was far from finished. Comment number 1 if you believe Morrison's downfall was inevitable. Like and subscribe if you think Marcus's fight for justice should never have come to this. But here's the real question. With Morrison gone, will the system finally change, or will it simply find a new enforcer to protect its corruption? The aftermath of the shootout left Marcus Reed sitting on the curb outside his own house, blood on his knuckles, adrenaline still surging through his veins. The flashing lights of patrol cars bathed the street in chaotic red and blue. But Marcus barely registered the movement around him. Morrison was dead. The man who had hunted him, framed him, tried to destroy him. Gone. But victory felt hollow. Torres crouched beside him, her face drawn and pale. "Ambulance is on the way," she muttered, glancing at the bruises darkening Marcus's jaw and ribs. "But you're lucky to be breathing." Marcus exhaled slowly, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth. Lucky? His laugh was bitter. This wasn't luck. This was survival. Torres didn't argue. She stood, barking orders at the surrounding officers. "Secure the scene. I want Morrison's weapon bagged, the body cams rolling, and every damn piece of evidence catalogued. No missing footage this time." Marcus's gaze drifted to Morrison's lifeless body, slumped on the hardwood floor just inside the doorway. The man's eyes, once burning with hate, were empty now, but the damage he'd done lived on. "Reed," Torres said quietly, drawing his attention. "You know it doesn't end here, right? Morrison's dead, but someone else pulled the strings. He wasn't smart enough to orchestrate all this alone." Marcus nodded grimly. "Yeah, the fingerprints, the planted evidence, the silence from command. This wasn't just one rogue cop. This was the system protecting itself. The precinct moved quickly to wrap the incident in red tape. Officially, it was a justifiable use of force in response to an armed threat. The news would report Morrison's death as the violent end of a troubled officer who'd spiraled after suspension. Neat, tidy, contained. But Marcus knew better. The department was already shifting into damage control mode, ready to bury the story under procedural jargon and press releases. The real architects of the cover-up, the ones who authorized the fingerprint tampering, ignored the body cam footage and let Morrison run wild, were still out there, untouched. That night, Marcus sat in Torres's office, ice pack pressed against his ribs, while Carla Ramirez scrolled through encrypted messages on her laptop. They'd cracked Morrison's burner phone after the shootout, finding a string of texts between him and an unknown number, one tied to an unregistered device often used by internal affairs and upper command to avoid traceable communication. "Here," Carla said, turning the screen toward Marcus. "Look at this." The message thread was chilling. Unknown. "Reed's still a problem. Video didn't bury him. Make it permanent. Morrison. Consider it done. Unknown. Clean house after. No loose ends." Marcus's throat tightened. This wasn't just personal, it was systematic. Someone high up had ordered the hit, and Morrison had been the blunt instrument. But with Morrison dead, Marcus now had the smoking gun. Proof that the conspiracy reached beyond one disgruntled officer. Torres leaned over Carla's shoulder, eyes narrowing. "That number's got to be Reynolds. He had the authority, the access, and the motive to cover this up. He knew if you exposed Morrison, the department's dirty laundry would come spilling out." Marcus nodded, jaw tightening. "Then we expose it all, not just Morrison, every rotten piece of this system." They moved fast. Carla worked her tech magic, tracing the burner number to an IP address registered to a secure terminal inside. The precinct, one only accessible with command-level credentials. Meanwhile, Marcus drafted an official statement, not for the department, but for the public. The video he recorded that night wasn't just another plea for justice. It was a declaration of war against corruption. "My name is Detective Marcus Reed," he began, face bruised but eyes burning with determination. "For the past week, I've been hunted, not by criminals, but by my own department. I was framed, threatened and nearly killed because I refused to stay silent. Officer Caleb Morrison was the face of that attack, but he wasn't acting alone. I have proof that senior officials within the Mason Heights Police Department authorized the cover-up and ordered my assassination. He held up the burner phone, screen flashing with the damning messages. This is bigger than one corrupt cop. This is about a system that protects its own at any cost. But it ends now. I'm making this public because I don't trust the system to police itself, and neither should you. The video went live across platforms, spreading like wildfire. Within hours, it dominated news cycles. Protesters flooded the streets outside the precinct, chanting "Clean house" and "No justice, no peace." Community leaders called for an independent federal investigation, while local politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. But the real blow came when Carla cracked the final layer of encryption on Morrison's messages, uncovering archived call logs. The number he'd coordinated with wasn't just tied to Reynolds. It was also linked to several past investigations, quietly closed without charges, cases involving excessive force, racial profiling, and internal harassment complaints. Marcus forwarded everything to the press, bypassing the department entirely. By sunrise, the headlines were inescapable. Detective Reed uncovers corruption at highest levels of Mason Heights PD. Police captain accused of ordering hit on fellow officer. Systemic racism and retaliation exposed from inside the force. The fallout was swift. Captain Reynolds was placed on immediate administrative leave, but the city's hands were forced by public outrage. The mayor called a press conference, announcing an independent task force to investigate the department's practices, with Marcus Reed as a key advisor. It was a victory, but Marcus didn't celebrate. Not yet. Late that evening, he stood outside the now empty house he once called safe. Maya sat in the car, eyes wary, as she watched her husband stare at the boarded-up window where the warning brick had shattered glass days earlier. "You did, she said quietly. "You exposed them." Marcus nodded, but his face remained hard. "Exposed, yeah, but dismantled? Not yet. They'll replace Reynolds with someone just as bad if we don't keep the pressure on. This fight doesn't end with one man falling." Maya reached out, fingers brushing his. "So what now?" Marcus glanced down at the badge in his hand. The same badge that had failed to protect him, but also the one he'd refused to surrender. Slowly, deliberately, he clipped it back onto his belt. "Now," he said, voice steady, "we finish what they started." The battle against corruption wasn't over, but for the first time, Marcus wasn't fighting alone. The community had rallied, the world was watching, and the system, once untouchable, now stood exposed and vulnerable. And Marcus Reed, he was done playing defense. It was time to strike back. The sun rose over Mason Heights, casting long shadows across a city grappling with an uncomfortable truth. Detective Marcus Reed sat in the back of an unmarked car, watching the precinct from across the street. The building that once represented order and justice now stood as a symbol of corruption exposed, its facade cracked by the weight of undeniable evidence. Inside, chaos reigned. Reporters crowded the entrance, microphones thrust toward anyone in uniform. Protesters held signs demanding accountability, their chants echoing down the block. "Clean house, end the cover-up." Marcus's phone buzzed. Carla Ramirez's name flashed on the screen. "It's happening," she said without preamble. "Reynolds is in custody. The feds picked him up an hour ago. Conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. They've got enough to hold him without bail." Marcus closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. It was the break they'd fought for, but satisfaction didn't come easy. "What about the others?" "3 more arrests so far," Carla continued. 2 from internal affairs, 1 from the evidence division, the guy who misfiled your body cam footage. More names are coming up as they dig through Morrison's communications. This is bigger than we thought. Marcus opened his eyes, gaze hardening. "It always is." Torres slid into the driver's seat, handing Marcus a cup of coffee. "The chief's holding a press conference in an hour. Word is she's throwing everyone under the bus to save herself." "Let her," Marcus muttered. "As long as the truth gets out." Torres nodded, rubbing her temples. "You sure you don't want to be there? This all started with you." Marcus shook his head. It's not about me. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to the next black man walking home from work. Let the system answer for itself. Still, he couldn't resist turning on the live stream when the press conference began. The chief stood stiffly behind a podium, flanked by city officials, trying to mask their discomfort. Her words were measured, carefully crafted, to distance herself from the scandal unraveling around her. Effective immediately, Captain Reynolds has been terminated from his position, pending criminal prosecution. The officers involved in the fabrication of evidence against Detective Reed are under investigation, and any officer found complicit will face disciplinary action and potential criminal charges. Marcus's lip curled. Disciplinary action. Always. The soft touch when it came to the powerful. But at least the world was watching now. They couldn't sweep this under the rug without leaving the lump in plain sight. The chief continued, voice strained. We will also be implementing mandatory bias training and an external oversight committee to ensure transparency moving forward. Carla snorted on the other end of the line. Bias training? Like a PowerPoint's gonna fix decades of systemic racism? Marcus didn't answer. He knew real change didn't come from workshops and committees. It came from pressure, relentless, unforgiving pressure. As the press conference wrapped up, Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it was Maya. He answered quickly. Are you watching? She asked, voice tense. They're acting like this is the end. Like they cleaned house. And everything's fine now. Marcus glanced back at the precinct, at the officers standing in clusters, some looking relieved, others angry. The cracks were showing, but the foundation hadn't crumbled yet. It's not the end, Marcus said quietly. It's just the start. Later that afternoon, Marcus walked into the precinct, not as a suspect, not as a victim, but as a man, reclaiming his ground. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the past week pressing down on him. Conversations hushed as he passed, eyes flicking toward the badge now clipped firmly to his belt. He stopped by Torres's desk. Got a minute? She glanced up, surprised. You're back already? Not for long, Marcus replied. Just tying up loose ends. In the conference room, the task force had set up headquarters, papers and evidence bags scattered across the table. Carla stood at the center, directing agents as they catalogued every detail of the investigation. Marcus, she greeted, exhaustion etched into her features. You really should take a break. You earned it. Breaks don't stop bullets, Marcus said flatly. What's the latest? Carla sighed, running a hand through her hair. The task force is pushing for a full audit of past cases Reynolds and his crew touched. We're already finding patterns, evidence lost in cases involving black and brown suspects, complaints buried, testimonies coerced. It's worse than we thought. Marcus's fists clenched. Of course it is. Carla studied him for a moment. You know, you don't have to stay in this fight. You expose the truth, you can walk away, start fresh. Marcus looked past her, out the window where protesters still gathered, holding signs with his name alongside the word justice. He thought of the countless faces he'd seen over the years, victims ignored, lives ruined by a system that prioritized power over people. Walking away meant leaving them behind. I can't, Marcus said finally. Not until the system's too broken to rebuild the same way. Carla smiled faintly. Didn't think you would. That night, Marcus returned home to Maya. The house still bore scars from the past week, boarded windows, scuff marks on the door where Morrison had kicked it in. But it was quiet now, peaceful, if only for a moment. Maya met him on the porch, arms crossed. You coming in, or are you planning to stand there all night? Marcus smiled for the first time in days. Just taking it in. We made it. She stepped closer, eyes softening. For now. For now, Marcus echoed, pulling her into a hug. But next time, we'll be ready. And for the first time in too long, Marcus believed it. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the tide had turned. Truth had pierced the armor of power, and the system, exposed and bleeding, could no longer pretend innocence. Marcus Reed had survived the storm. Now he was ready to change the weather. 1 year later, The sun dipped low over Mason Heights, casting long shadows across the bustling streets. The neighborhood, once defined by tension and distrust, now buzzed with cautious optimism. Murals adorned brick walls, each stroke of paint, telling stories of resilience and change. At the heart of one mural, larger than life, stood a figure in a plain hoodie and jeans, holding up a badge, not as a symbol of power, but of accountability. Beneath it, bold letters read, "Justice is watching." Marcus Reed stood across the street from that mural, hands in his pockets, lips pressed into a thoughtful line. He hadn't asked for the attention, hadn't wanted to become the face of a movement, but fate rarely asked for permission. Life after the scandal had been anything but quiet. The department underwent a massive overhaul, driven not by goodwill, but by necessity. The independent task force uncovered years of corruption, cases quietly dismissed, evidence tampered with, complaints buried. Reynolds was just the tip of the iceberg. Multiple high-ranking officers faced charges, while others resigned before the investigation could touch them. And the community? It didn't forget. Protests turned into organized town halls. Civilian oversight committees formed, pushing for transparency in every corner of law enforcement. The Mason Heights Police Department, once a fortress of unchecked authority, now operated under the watchful eye of the people it served. Marcus hadn't gone back to business as usual. He couldn't. After months of testimony, interviews, and endless paperwork, he accepted a new role, one he never imagined himself taking. He now led the department's Accountability and Reform Task Force, a position created out of public demand. His job wasn't just solving crimes, it was preventing the system from creating more victims like himself. "Detective Reed," a voice called from behind. Marcus turned to see Carla Ramirez jogging up the sidewalk, a folder tucked under her arm. She looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. "Thought I'd find you here." "Old habits," Marcus replied, nodding toward the mural. "Keeps me grounded," Carla smirked. "Grounded? You're practically a local legend now. Kids are dressing up as you for career day." Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. "They should aim higher." Carla handed him the folder. "Final report from the task force audit. It's official. Every officer involved in your setup has been either fired, indicted, or both. Even the IA guys who looked the other way." Marcus flipped through the pages, eyes scanning names he'd once called colleagues. Men and women who'd sworn the same oath he had, but twisted it to serve themselves. The system hadn't just protected them, it had empowered them. Until now. "Good," Marcus said quietly, closing the folder. One less crack for someone to slip through. They stood there for a moment, the city humming around them. The fight wasn't over, it never would be. But for the first time, progress didn't feel like an illusion. "Heading to the community center?" Carla asked, nodding down the block. "Yeah," Marcus replied, already moving. "The kids are expecting me." The community center had become his sanctuary, a place where the next generation could see justice not as an abstract concept, but as something tangible, something worth fighting for. Inside, the walls were lined with posters about civil rights, leadership, and empowerment. In one corner, a group of teenagers huddled around laptops, working on a project titled "Know Your Rights." A boy no older than 12 looked up as Marcus entered. His eyes widened. "Detective Reed, you're back. Promised I'd help you finish that mock trial, didn't I?" Marcus grinned, setting his folder down. The boy nodded eagerly, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot. Why'd you go back?" the boy asked, brow furrowed. "After everything they did to you, after they tried to ruin your life, why not just leave?" Marcus knelt to meet the boy's gaze. It was the same question he'd asked himself countless times in the darkest moments, but now the answer came easily. "Because leaving wouldn't change anything," Marcus said, voice steady. "The system's broken, yeah, but if people like us walk away, it stays broken. We don't fix it by abandoning the fight. We fix it by staying, pushing, and holding the line. So the next time someone like me gets stopped for fitting a description, they walk away safe. Free." The boy nodded slowly, absorbing the words like scripture. Behind him, Maya entered the room, arms crossed, watching Marcus with quiet pride. She'd stood by him through it all, every threat, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, and now they were building something better together. As the kids returned to their work, Marcus stepped outside, Maya falling into step beside him. "You really think it'll stick this time?" she asked, glancing at the bustling street. The officers walking beats with body cams now fully functional and monitored by third-party oversight. Marcus didn't answer right away. Change was fragile, always at risk of being rolled back the moment vigilance slipped. But the difference now? The people weren't sleeping. They were awake, aware, and unwilling to settle for empty promises. "I think," Marcus finally said, "that the systems learning it can't survive without trust. And trust, that has to be earned every single day." They walked past the mural, the painted version of Marcus, staring down the street like a silent sentinel. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a journey. One step, one fight, one victory at a time. And Marcus Reed was ready to walk that road no matter how long it stretched ahead, because for the first time he wasn't walking it alone. The story of Detective Marcus Reed is more than just a tale of personal survival. It's a stark reminder of how deeply bias can be woven into the very systems meant to uphold justice. Marcus wore the badge, played by the rules, and still found himself face down on the pavement. Not because of what he did, but because of what he looked like. His story shows us that the badge alone cannot protect those the system was never designed to protect. But Marcus's fight also revealed something powerful. Accountability doesn't start from within the system. It starts with the people who refused to accept silence as an answer. It was the bystanders filming the incident, the community demanding answers, and the relentless pursuit of truth that forced the system to face its own corruption. Without that pressure, Marcus would have been another statistic, another case quietly closed. This story highlights a critical lesson. Injustice thrives in silence, but it crumbles under scrutiny. The system only changes when those inside and outside of it work together to expose the cracks and demand better. Marcus didn't just fight for himself. He fought to make sure the next person walking down the street, badge or not, didn't have to face the same nightmare. But now, the question falls to you. What would you have done in Marcus's place? If you saw someone being targeted, would you speak up? Would you record, report, and resist the urge to look away? Comment number 1, if you believe accountability is the only path to true justice. Like and subscribe if you believe stories like Marcus's need to be told until change becomes reality. And don't forget to share this story, because the more people who see it, the harder it becomes for injustice to hide. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for standing on the side of truth. Stay safe, stay aware, and never stop pushing for the world we all deserve. See you in the next story.